Okay, welcome to consumption. What we're going to look at is what determines the level of consumption in an economy. The key thing, of course, is income is either consumed or saved. So the factors that determine consumption, if they increase consumption, they will decrease saving. Okay, so if you're writing or discussing or thinking about saving, the opposite thing will tend to happen to saving. Let's look at consumption then. The key determinant, surprisingly, of what determines consumption is income. The bigger your income, the greater the consumption. So a simple little equation here is, if we look at your income, multiply it by the marginal propensity to consume, this gives you your consumption. And all the marginal propensity to consume says, the MPS, is if your income goes at £10, say you spend another £6, then your marginal propensity to consume will be 0.6. And we can show this on a simple consumption function here. If your income goes up £10, then do a little dotted line up, then you spend an extra £6 on consumption expenditure. And as long as we start the origin, the consumption function is a straight line going up. Its slope depends on the marginal propensity to consume. So in simple terms, if your income increases, your consumption on average across the whole economy will tend to increase. Now of course what's important is disposable income. So disposable income is after you've paid direct taxes. So direct taxes will be things such as income tax and national insurance. And after you've paid the direct taxes, you end up with your disposable income. So a change in the tax level can very much affect your disposable income, as well as changes, of course, in your wages. This is called a consumption function. All it says is the level of consumption is equal to your income multiplied by the marginal propensity to consume. And that just means your tendency to consume when income increases a little, or indeed falls a little. So income, not surprisingly, is a key determinant of consumption. A second determinant is consumer confidence. Now this is quite psychological, if not very psychological, and say that you think there's going to be a big recession, and say you think that you might lose your job, what are you going to do? Well, you're probably going to cut back on consumption. You're probably going to consume fewer consumer durables. You're going to, and consumer durables are simply big, usually big items that are durable, such as washing machines, TVs, phones, computers, etc. And non-essential items, such as that nice holiday in Barbados, you're maybe going to cut back on. If you're worried about the future, for whatever reason. If you're confident about the future, the opposite will happen. You'll think your job prospects are good, you're going to get a pay rise, then consumer confidence will tend to increase, and consumption will increase. So the Bank of England likes to measure consumer confidence using survey evidence. They survey a few thousand people generally and asked about what they intend to spend in the next year or so, and that's a measure of consumer confidence. If it increases, then consumption will of course tend to increase, depending on the other factors of course. Well, a third factor that's important is the net wealth effect. In the United States, particularly share prices are important, but in the UK, house prices are also important. The main assets, be it houses or shares that people have, if they go up in value, it's called a positive net wealth effect. And that will, first of all, create a feel-good factor that people will feel richer, but more importantly, people will have positive equity. So they will be richer because they have more wealth. They become more wealthy. So we call that positive equity. That equity that their shares have gone up in value, their house has gone up in value compared to what they paid for it. Therefore, they're very happy. Let's draw a smiley face here. And then what will they do? They will consume more. Now, sadly, the opposite happens. So when we have a recession, that's often started by, say, a stock market crash, such as the 1929 Wall Street crash. House prices plummeting in the early 90s or in 2007 led to recession. So if house prices fall, people then often have negative equity. If you have negative equity, it might be that you're particularly unhappy because the house is worth less than what you paid for it. What are you going to do then? Well, if you want to sell the house, you're going to have to save a lot, aren't you? So certainly people will then, if they have negative equity, well, cut back on consumption and increase saving. So net wealth effects are significant. And another area, of course, that's important is interest rates. Now, your effective disposable income is basically your income after you've paid your direct taxes and after you've paid your mortgage. So a lot of people pay a mortgage. The mortgage can be a variable interest mortgage, okay, where the mortgage rate goes up and down with the interest rate set by the Bank of England. If your mortgage rate goes up, then you're going to be paying more of your salary in mortgages, in your mortgage. So therefore it's going to leave a less effective disposable income. That's income after you've paid your taxes and after you've paid your mortgage. Okay? So mortgage interest payments are rather important in terms of determining your consumption. Now some people of course don't have a mortgage. Some people don't own a property. Some people have a fixed mortgage, which irons out those mortgage changes over time. So you might have a 2-year fixed mortgage. That's quite common in the UK, or 5-year, maybe a 10-year. And then, therefore, this is not going to change. Another factor, of course, if interest rates increase, it's going to make it more attractive to save because you get a greater return on saving. So people will tend to save a greater amount when interest rates increase, and vice versa when they fall, of course. The ease at which you can obtain credit is important. So sometimes the Bank of England might try and tighten credit conditions when it wants to prevent the markets getting out of control, perhaps, and then it will be harder to borrow in order to consume. So a lot of people borrow and they spend on their lovely credit card. This is actually a debit card, but never mind, on a card like this. And of course the interest they pay in that, of how easy it is to obtain credit, determines the amount of consumption. Okay, and then finally maybe inflation is important, because if there's going to be inflation, it will reduce your purchasing power. In other words, it will reduce the value of money. So here, this pound could buy much more 10 years ago than what it could buy now. Okay, so inflation reduces the purchasing power, and therefore it will lead to falling consumption. However, if you expect inflation to occur in the future, what will you do? You will maybe purchase now rather than pay more for the product that you want in the future. Not wanting to complicate things, but deflation does the opposite. So if you're expecting a fall in the average price level, then you will tend to buy in the future and put off buying today. Anyhow, the key determinants of consumption, and as you know, consumption is an important part of aggregate demand, are of course income, consumer confidence, net wealth effect, interest rates, and inflation. Another thing to point out, as you become richer, you tend to save more because you've got all the basic things that you want. You know, you've got your food, your shelter, a few clothes. What more do you need? Anyhow, it's likely that the MPC will tend to fall as people become richer and tends to be lower in richer countries. So I thought you might like to know that. So I hope that's useful. Thank you for watching.